We are now hearing for the first time since the Senate made its move from President Trump. Gabe Gutierrez is at the White House. Come on in, Gabe, because it came on Truth Social, which is where the president often delivers that first reaction in the last few seconds.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. Look, no sooner than I had to walk away from this camera a few minutes ago, went inside to speak with White House officials about whether the president would sign this bill potentially tonight. At that same exact time, the president posting this on Truth Social, not giving any indication for a timeline, but notably saying, quote, "I don't care when the Senate passes the House bill, whether tonight or at some other time in the near future. I just don't want Republicans to take their eyes off of all the victories we've had." And then he goes on to list some of those victories, including what he calls the great big beautiful bill and also closing borders.
Okay, so Trump just did something that's absolutely wild. Trump was sitting in a Manhattan courtroom on November 24th, 2025, listening to a judge read victim testimony about Epstein's operations. And as the judge is reading this testimony aloud, testimony detailing Epstein's trafficking networks, testimony describing operations at Mar-a-Lago, testimony describing Trump's property connections to Epstein's criminal enterprise, Trump just gets up and bolts. Trump sprints out of the courtroom. Trump doesn't say anything. Trump doesn't wait for the hearing to end. Trump doesn't stay to hear what's being said about his property. Trump just leaves. He exits immediately, and it's all caught on video. It's all captured on camera, and that video goes absolutely viral. That video is everywhere. That video is the story. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. Now, here's what's really significant about this moment. We're talking about a victim, Virginia Giuffre, testifying about Epstein's operations. We're talking about testimony that allegedly links Epstein's trafficking network directly to Trump properties.
The White House just out with a new blistering response for Democrats after they released emails written by Jeffrey Epstein that reference President Trump. Here's Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
It is not a coincidence that the Democrats leaked these emails to the fake news this morning ahead of Republicans reopening the government.
Why are White House officials then meeting with Representative Boebert in an effort to try and get her to not sign this petition calling for the release of the files?
Doesn't it show transparency that members of the Trump administration are willing to brief members of Congress whenever they please? Doesn't that show our level of transparency?
We're talking about testimony that describes Epstein using Mar-a-Lago as an operational hub for his criminal enterprise. We're talking about testimony that describes Trump's property connections to Epstein and Epstein's victims. And as the judge is reading this testimony aloud in open court, as this testimony is becoming public record, Trump walks out. Trump can't sit there and listen to it. Trump can't face the testimony. Trump bolts out of the courtroom like he's running from the truth itself. And the optics are absolutely devastating for Trump. Think about what that looks like to the American people. Trump is pushing for transparency. Trump signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Trump is saying, release the documents, let the truth come out, we have nothing to hide. But then when actual victim testimony is being read about his property connections to Epstein, Trump runs away. Trump can't handle it. Trump can't face it. Trump has to leave the courtroom immediately. And that's caught on video. That's all over social media. That's on every news outlet. That's what people are talking about, and it completely destroys Trump's narrative about transparency and truth-seeking. So here's what happened. There was a hearing on unsealing Epstein grand jury transcripts. This is part of the broader push to release Epstein documents that Congress forced. This is part of what Congress mandated with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. This is part of what the courts are ordering with the grand jury unsealing decisions. And at this hearing, the judge decided to read some of Virginia Giuffre's testimony aloud. Giuffre is a major Epstein victim. Giuffre is someone who was trafficked by Epstein for years. Giuffre is someone who was groomed, abused, and exploited by Epstein. Giuffre is someone who can testify in detail about Epstein's operations. And in her testimony, she describes Mar-a-Lago. She describes Epstein using Trump's property. She describes operations at Trump venues. And the judge reads this testimony aloud in open court. The judge is reading details about Epstein's trafficking network. The judge is reading details about where trafficking operations occurred. The judge is reading details about where trafficking operations occurred. The judge is reading about Mar-a-Lago. The judge is reading about Trump properties being used. The judge is reading about Epstein's criminal activities at Trump's venues. And Trump is sitting right there in the courtroom listening to this. Trump is hearing this testimony directly. Trump is hearing a victim describe Epstein's trafficking operations at his property. Trump is hearing specific details about how Epstein used Mar-a-Lago, and Trump can't take it. Trump can't sit there and listen. Trump gets up and walks out. Trump exits the courtroom in what witnesses describe as a sprint. Now, there are emails that have been released, emails dated November 12th, that allegedly show Trump spent hours with a victim at Epstein's house. These are not vague allegations or rumors or speculation. These are emails that are part of the official record. These are emails that have been released as part of the Epstein unsealing process ordered by courts. These are emails that have been analyzed by legal experts and journalists, and they allege specific conduct by Trump involving contact with trafficking victims. That's incredibly damaging. That's the kind of allegation that raises serious questions about Trump's knowledge and involvement. And here's what's important about the combination of the testimony and the emails. Giuffre is testifying in open court about Mar-a-Lago being used by Epstein for his operations. Giuffre is testifying about her experiences at Trump's property. Giuffre is describing specific details about what happened. And then we have emails showing Trump spent time with the victim at Epstein's house. So you've got victim testimony about Trump's property being used for trafficking operations, and you've got documentation showing Trump had contact with trafficking victims. And that's a really damaging combination. That's the kind of information that raises serious questions about Trump's knowledge and his involvement. And think about what Giuffre's testimony says about the trafficking operation specifically. Giuffre is describing in detail how Epstein operated. Giuffre is describing how he recruited victims. Giuffre is describing how he groomed victims. Giuffre is describing how he brought victims to various properties. Giuffre is describing the network of wealthy individuals who were involved with Epstein. And when Giuffre describes Mar-a-Lago specifically, she's describing a property that was part of this trafficking network. She's describing a place where Epstein's operations occurred. She's describing a venue that was used for trafficking purposes. And the timing is absolutely brutal for Trump. We're in the middle of a shutdown. We're in the middle of impeachment votes. We're dealing with all kinds of political chaos and crisis. And right in the middle of all of that, there's video of Trump sprinting out of a courtroom while a judge is reading victim testimony about Epstein. Right in the middle of everything, there's video of Trump fleeing while a victim describes his property being used for trafficking. And that video goes absolutely viral. That video is on every social media platform. That video is being shown on every news outlet, and people are watching that video and forming their own conclusions about what it means. And here's what the commentators are saying. Legal analysts are saying the symbolism is devastating. Political commentators are saying Trump walks out when the truth gets close. Trump can't face victim testimony. Trump can't sit and listen to descriptions of his property being connected to trafficking. Trump has to run. Trump has to flee. And that's the narrative that's forming. That's what people are thinking when they see that video. That's what people are saying when they talk about what happened in that courtroom. That's the story that's defining this moment. And the victims are outraged. Epstein survivors are saying, this is disgusting. This is the president of the United States running away from our testimony. This is the president unable to face what happened to us. This is the president of the United States fleeing while our trauma is being described in court. And that's an incredibly powerful message. That's the kind of thing that resonates with people emotionally. That's the kind of thing that affects how people think about Trump and his character. And here's what's important about the narrative Trump has been trying to build. Trump has been pushing for the Epstein files to be released publicly. Trump has been saying, let the truth come out. Trump has been saying, we need full transparency. Trump has been saying, there's nothing to hide. Trump has been positioning himself as supporting transparency and truth. But then when the truth actually does come out, when victim testimony is being read in court, when his property's connections are being described, Trump runs. Trump can't handle it. Trump has to leave. And that completely destroys the narrative Trump has been trying to build about transparency and accountability. So that's what happened on November 24th. Trump was in a Manhattan courtroom listening to victim testimony. A judge was reading Virginia Giuffre's testimony about Epstein's operations at Mar-a-Lago. Trump heard the judge describe connections between Epstein's trafficking network and his property. Trump heard specific details about his property being used for trafficking, and Trump got up and left. Trump sprinted out of the courtroom. Trump couldn't face the testimony, and the whole thing was caught on camera. And that video is now defining the Epstein narrative heading into 2026. And we're going to break down exactly what this means, what the testimony reveals, and why this moment is so significant for Trump's future. All right, so let's understand what Virginia Giuffre's testimony actually says and why Trump's reaction to it is so significant. Because the details matter. The specifics of the testimony matter. Because Giuffre is a credible witness. Giuffre has been public about her experience for decades. Giuffre has testified in multiple cases about Epstein's operations. Giuffre has written a book about her experience, and her testimony is detailed and specific about how Epstein's trafficking network functioned and which properties were involved. So let's start with who Virginia Giuffre is. Giuffre is a woman who was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein starting when she was a teenager. Giuffre was recruited as a young person by Epstein's associates. Giuffre was groomed and manipulated by Epstein. Giuffre was abused by Epstein. Giuffre was brought to Epstein's properties. Giuffre was brought to properties owned by Epstein's associates and wealthy individuals in Epstein's network. Giuffre was exploited and trafficked by Epstein for years, and Giuffre eventually escaped and became an advocate for survivors of trafficking. Giuffre has written a memoir about her experience. Giuffre has given extensive interviews about her experience. Giuffre has testified in courts about Epstein's operations. Giuffre is a credible, consistent witness, and in her grand jury testimony, the testimony that was being read aloud in the courtroom on November 24th, Giuffre describes Epstein's operations in detail. Giuffre describes where she was taken. Giuffre describes the venues Epstein used. Giuffre describes who was involved in the trafficking. Giuffre describes how the trafficking network operated. Giuffre describes the recruitment process. Giuffre describes the grooming process. Giuffre describes the exploitation. And in her testimony, Giuffre describes Mar-a-Lago. Giuffre describes being at Trump's property. Giuffre describes Epstein using Trump's property for his operations. Giuffre describes the trafficking activities that occurred at Trump's venue. And that testimony is incredibly significant. That testimony directly connects Trump's property to Epstein's trafficking network. Now, we also have emails that have been released through the Epstein unsealing process. These emails are dated November 12th. These emails allegedly show that Trump spent hours with a victim at Epstein's house. These are not vague allegations or rumors. These are not hearsay or speculation. These are emails that are part of the official record. These are emails that have been released by courts as part of the Epstein unsealing process. These are emails that have been analyzed by experts, and these emails allege specific conduct by Trump involving a trafficking victim. And here's what's important about the combination of the testimony and the emails. Giuffre is testifying in open court about Mar-a-Lago being used by Epstein for his trafficking operations. Giuffre is testifying about her experiences at Trump's property. Giuffre is describing specific details about what occurred at Trump's venue. And then we have emails documenting that Trump spent time with a victim at Epstein's house. So you've got victim testimony about Trump's property being used for trafficking. And you've got documentary evidence showing Trump had direct contact with trafficking victims. And that's a really damaging combination. That's the kind of information that raises serious questions. That's the kind of evidence that demands answers. And think about what Giuffre's testimony says about the trafficking operation specifically. Giuffre is describing in detail how Epstein operated his criminal enterprise. Giuffre is describing how he identified and recruited victims. Giuffre is describing how he groomed them and manipulated them. Giuffre is describing how he brought victims to various properties. Giuffre is describing the network of wealthy individuals who were involved with Epstein. Giuffre is describing the structure of the trafficking network. And when Giuffre describes Mar-a-Lago specifically, she's describing a property that was part of this criminal operation. She's describing a place where Epstein's trafficking operations occurred. She's describing a venue that was used for exploiting victims. And here's what's important about the judge reading this testimony aloud. When the judge reads testimony aloud in court, it becomes official, public record. It becomes part of the documented proceedings. It's undeniable. It's there for everyone to hear and see. It becomes real in a way that written documents sometimes don't. When testimony is read aloud, it has power. It has emotional impact. Victims' words are being heard directly. The details are being described. The reality of what happened is being presented to the courtroom and to the public through media coverage. And Trump was sitting in the courtroom listening to his property being described as a venue for Epstein's trafficking operations. And think about what that must have felt like for Trump. Trump has been denying any involvement with Epstein. Trump has been trying to distance himself from Epstein. Trump has been trying to control the narrative about his relationship with Epstein. Trump has been claiming he barely knew Epstein. And then Trump is forced to sit in a courtroom and listen to a victim describe his property being used for trafficking. Trump is forced to listen to detailed testimony about his property being part of Epstein's criminal network. Trump is forced to sit there in the courtroom and hear it, and Trump can't take it. Trump walks out. Trump exits the courtroom immediately, and that's incredibly significant symbolically, because Trump is choosing to flee rather than face the testimony. Trump is choosing to leave rather than hear what the victim has to say. Trump is choosing to avoid being in the room while his property is being connected to trafficking. And that choice sends a message. That choice communicates something to the public. That choice says, I can't face this. I can't listen to this. I can't sit here while my property is being connected to trafficking. I can't face what happened at my venue. And that's devastating for Trump's defense, because it looks like Trump has something to hide. It looks like Trump is running from the truth. It looks like Trump can't face accountability. And here's what's interesting about Trump's earlier statements on Epstein. Trump has said in the past that he barely knew Epstein. Trump has said he had limited contact with Epstein. Trump has said they weren't close. Trump has said he wasn't involved in Epstein's crimes. Trump has denied knowledge of Epstein's activities, but the testimony contradicts that. The testimony suggests Epstein was regularly using Trump's property. The testimony suggests Trump was around victims. The testimony suggests Trump was part of Epstein's circle, and Trump can't sit and listen to that testimony. Trump has to leave. Trump has to exit the courtroom. And think about what Jehovah's testimony means for Trump's credibility. If Jehovah is testifying truthfully, and she's a credible witness, she's been consistent over decades, she's testified in multiple cases, then Trump's property was being used by Epstein for trafficking. That means Trump either knew about it or Trump was complicit in not knowing. That means Trump either approved it explicitly or Trump turned a blind eye. Either way, Trump's denials that he barely knew Epstein don't match up with the reality that Epstein was operating at Trump's property on an ongoing basis. Okay, so let's break down what Trump bolting from the courtroom actually means. What are the real consequences? What happens next? First point, Trump just provided video evidence of his inability to face accountability. Trump literally ran away from victim testimony. Trump is on video sprinting out of a courtroom while a judge is describing his property's connection to Epstein's trafficking network. And that video is going to be replayed thousands of times. That video is going to be used in political advertisements. That video is going to define Trump's response to the Epstein scandal. That video is going to be what people remember about Trump when they think about Epstein. That image of Trump running away is going to stick with voters. Second point, the testimony about Mar-a-Lago is now public and undeniable. The judge read Jude Frey's testimony aloud in open court. The testimony is part of the official public record. The testimony is documented. The testimony describes Trump's property being used for Epstein operations. And Trump can't deny it. Trump can't claim it's not true. Trump can't claim it's fake news or a hoax. The testimony is there. It's been read in open court. It's been documented. It's been recorded. And it's devastating for Trump. Third point, Trump's narrative about transparency and truth-seeking is destroyed. Trump has been saying that we need to release the Epstein documents, let the truth come out, there's nothing to hide. But then when the truth comes out, when victim testimony is being described, when his property is being connected to trafficking, Trump runs away. And that's devastating for Trump's message. That's devastating for Trump's credibility on the Epstein issue. That's devastating for Trump's attempt to control the narrative about his property connections to Epstein. Fourth point, the survivors are outraged and energized. Epstein survivors have been fighting for years to get documents released. Epstein survivors have been fighting for accountability. Epstein survivors have been demanding that the truth come out. And now they see the president running away from their testimony. Now they see the president unable to face their trauma. Now they see the president fleeing while they're trying to describe what happened to them. And that's going to mobilize survivors. That's going to energize advocates. That's going to increase pressure for more document release and more accountability. Now, why does this matter right now? We're heading into 2026 midterms. We're in a crucial period for American politics. And this video of Trump bolting from the courtroom is going to be a defining image heading into the midterms. That's going to affect how people vote. That's going to affect Trump's approval ratings. That's going to affect Trump's political viability going forward. That image is going to be in voters' minds. And this is happening while all the other Epstein stuff is piling up. Congress forced DOJ records released through the Transparency Act. Courts ordered grand jury transcripts unsealed. Emails are being released. Connections between Trump and Epstein are being documented. And now we've got video of Trump literally running away from victim testimony. It's all coming together. It's all pointing in the same direction. It's all showing Trump's involvement, or at least Trump's inability to face the truth about his property connections. And here's what's important about the shutdown and impeachment context. We're in the middle of a shutdown. We're in the middle of impeachment votes. We're dealing with all kinds of political chaos. And right in the middle of all of that, Trump is dealing with Epstein testimony. Trump is dealing with victim statements about his property. Trump is dealing with the fallout from bolting out of the courtroom. Trump is dealing with viral video evidence of his reaction to victim testimony. That's a lot for Trump to manage at once. And think about what the political implications are. Democrats are going to use this video. Democrats are going to use this testimony. Democrats are going to say, look, Trump can't even face victim testimony without running away. Democrats are going to say, this is the president of the United States fleeing from accountability. Democrats are going to say, this is the president unable to face victims. Democrats are going to use this in campaign messaging. Democrats are going to use this in ads. Democrats are going to use this to shape how people think about Trump heading into 2026. And Republicans are going to have to respond. Republicans are going to have to defend Trump. Republicans are going to have to explain why Trump bolted from the courtroom. Republicans are going to have to defend Trump's connections to Epstein. Republicans are going to have to answer questions about what Mar-a-Lago was being used for, and that's going to be difficult. That's going to put Republicans in uncomfortable positions. That's going to affect Republican messaging heading into 2026. And here's what's important about the broader pattern. We've got Trump's courtroom explosion, where he was removed for disruptive behavior. We've got Trump's refusal to testify in the Carroll case. We've got Trump's appeals trying to avoid testimony under oath. And now we've got Trump literally running away from victim testimony about his property's connection to trafficking. It's a pattern of Trump avoiding accountability. It's a pattern of Trump being unable to face judicial proceedings. It's a pattern of Trump fleeing when things get difficult. And that pattern is going to affect how people think about Trump. And think about what this testimony reveals about Epstein's operations. The testimony describes how Epstein operated. The testimony describes the venues he used. The testimony describes the victims he trafficked. And that testimony implicates Trump's property directly. That testimony suggests Trump's property was part of the trafficking operation. That's the kind of allegation that raises serious questions. That's the kind of allegation that demands answers. That's the kind of allegation that voters are going to care about. And here's what's important about the precedent this sets. When victims testify in court about trafficking operations at specific properties, those allegations become part of the official record. Those allegations are documented forever. Those allegations can't be undone or erased. And if those allegations involve the President of the United States, they become part of the historical record of his presidency. That's going to follow Trump. That's going to define part of Trump's legacy. That's going to be part of how history remembers Trump's administration. And think about what happens next. There's more testimony coming. There are more documents being released. There are more emails being unsealed. The Epstein unsealing process is ongoing. Congress is continuing to demand documents. The courts are continuing to order releases. And every time something new comes out, every time new testimony is revealed, Trump is going to face questions about it. Trump is going to have to respond to it. Trump is going to have to explain his property connections, and Trump can't keep running away from it forever. So that's where we are. Trump bolted from the courtroom while victim testimony was being read about his property's connection to Epstein's trafficking network. Trump's reaction was captured on video. The video went viral worldwide. The testimony is now part of the public record. The narrative about Trump and Epstein is being shaped by his inability to face accountability, and that's going to have significant political consequences heading into 2026 midterms. All right, so that's the story. That's what happened. That's why it matters. And next time we're talking about what other testimony comes out, what other documents get released, and how Trump continues to deal with the fallout from the Epstein scandal heading into the midterms. So you definitely want to stick around for that.